It all began on an ordinary afternoon, the kind no one remembers, except something subtle changed. Maya moved into the apartment upstairs, and Daniel noticed the sound of footsteps where there had only been silence. Their first exchange was a nod in the hallway, then another. Nothing profound, no instant spark, just a quiet recognition. But sometimes, relationships begin not with fireworks, but with presence. And presence, they would learn, was everything. It began on a quiet, uneventful afternoon when Maya moved into the apartment upstairs. There was no dramatic soundtrack, no grand introduction, just the scraping sound of cardboard boxes and the faint hum of a new presence above. Daniel noticed because the building had always been quiet, and somehow the sound of footsteps above his head made him curious. He didn't approach her immediately. For weeks, their interaction was limited to casual nods in the hallway and awkward elevator silences. Still, there was something comforting about knowing someone was nearby. Their first real conversation happened because of a power outage. The whole building went dark one evening, and Maya was standing in the hallway, fumbling with her phone flashlight. Daniel offered a spare candle and ended up sitting on her floor, chatting as shadows danced on the walls. They talked about mundane things at first, work, groceries, the strange smell from the downstairs laundry room. But conversation flowed easily, and silence felt natural, not pressured. In that candlelit space, they were just two people, not strangers anymore. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was connection, plain and simple. It reminded Daniel of something he'd forgotten, that relationships often begin not with sparks, but with warmth. They started meeting more intentionally after that, sharing coffee on Sundays, walking to the corner bookstore, sometimes just talking in the hallway for longer than necessary. There was no rush. No one was chasing a label. They were simply getting to know each other, and that was enough. Over time, trust began to form in invisible layers. It built itself through small, repeated moments. Maya remembering Daniel's favorite tea, Daniel noticing when Maya had a hard day and offering silence instead of questions. Trust wasn't something they declared. It existed in the spaces where they could be unfiltered, where neither felt the need to perform. They learned how to listen, not to respond, but to understand. And that made all the difference. But real relationships, they soon discovered, aren't just about the good days. They are tested in friction, in disappointment, in vulnerability. One evening, Maya was distant. Daniel noticed, asked gently, and she responded sharply. It would have been easy to retreat, to let silence grow between them. Instead, Daniel said, "I'm here if you want to talk," and left it there. The next day, she knocked on his door, eyes puffy from crying. "I had a bad call with my dad. I didn't mean to snap." He didn't say, "It's okay." He said, "Thanks for telling me." That moment changed everything. They started learning the language of each other's needs. Maya needed space after emotional overload. Daniel needed reassurance after conflict. It wasn't always easy to remember, but they tried. And trying, over and over, mattered more than always getting it right. They started developing emotional safety, a rare and fragile thing. It meant they could disagree without fearing abandonment. It meant they could say, "I'm struggling," and be met with compassion, not judgment. As seasons passed, their relationship shifted. Friendship deepened, and new layers were added: affection, commitment, shared plans. But the foundation remained the same: mutual respect, curiosity, and care. They weren't trying to fix each other. Instead, they asked, "How can I support you?" That question became a cornerstone. It meant they viewed each other as partners, not projects. It meant growth was mutual. They also built rituals, not for the sake of tradition but as anchors. Sunday morning pancakes, a nightly check-in before bed, a walk every first Saturday of the month, rain or shine. These small consistencies created safety. Life brought chaos, work stress, family emergencies, illness, but their rituals remained, offering predictability in an unpredictable world. As their bond matured, they explored boundaries more openly. Maya realized she needed weekends with solitude to recharge. Daniel initially felt rejected, but instead of internalizing it, he asked questions. "What does solitude give you?" She explained, he listened, and slowly he began to appreciate her rhythm. In return, Maya honored Daniel's need for closeness during difficult times. They negotiated, adapted, and found ways to meet in the middle. Through everything, they held on to gratitude. Not performative, exaggerated thank you, but quiet acknowledgements. "Thanks for waiting, I noticed how much you've helped me lately. I'm grateful you're here." Gratitude reminded them that love wasn't owed, it was chosen. And chosen again, every day. They also learned to handle mistakes. Not just with apologies, but with repair. When arguments flared, they didn't pretend nothing happened. They returned to the table, talked about their triggers, asked, how can we do better next time? Repair took humility, and humility required trust. Over time, their conflicts became less about winning and more about understanding. They gave each other room to grow, not just in the relationship, but outside it. Maya took a month-long course abroad. Daniel started volunteering on weekends. Their individual growth didn't threaten the relationship, it strengthened it. They returned to each other fuller, with more to share. Independence and connection didn't have to be at odds. Their connection grew into something deeply rooted. Not because every day was easy, but because they kept choosing to stay through the hard ones. They showed up on days when love felt like work. On days when conversations were tired and patience was short. They didn't walk away when things got uncomfortable. They learned in. They shared dreams, but also fears. They talked about the future, the kind with mortgages and maybe kids, but also the kind that asked, what if one of us changes? And when those changes came, they didn't panic. They stayed curious. Who are you becoming? Became an ongoing question. Love meant making room for evolution. There were moments of jealousy, of doubt, of insecurity. But instead of hiding those feelings, they brought them into the light. I felt forgotten when you didn't text back. I was scared you'd find someone better. Vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was a bridge. It brought them closer, not further apart. And still, they maintained presence. Real presence. Phones down, eyes up, attention given. In a world of distractions, being fully there became a gift they offered each other again and again. Sometimes presence meant listening, other times it meant simply sitting in silence, sharing space. They weathered losses together, a grandparent's passing, a job layoff, a betrayal from a friend. During those moments, words weren't always needed. Sometimes it was a hand held in silence. Other times it was whispered reminders. I've got you. Pain, shared, became more bearable. Time passed. The relationship changed shape. It wasn't always thrilling. It was sometimes boring, sometimes challenging, often quiet. But it was real, grounded, and honest. The kind of relationship that doesn't demand attention but quietly persists, like a tree growing roots beneath the surface. They realized that love isn't found. It's built, slowly, intentionally, imperfectly. Brick by brick, with communication, patience, forgiveness, and effort. Love didn't save them, but it gave them a place to belong. A place to rest. A place to return to when the world felt unkind. Years later, a friend asked Maya what the secret was. How had they made it work for so long? She thought for a while before answering. We didn't aim for perfect, she said. We aimed for honest, and we never stopped choosing each other. Daniel nodded, adding, and we remembered we were always on the same side. Even when it didn't feel like it. Because that's how relationships are built. Not through perfect compatibility or instant chemistry, but through showing up. Through listening when it's hard, apologizing when it's needed, and growing even when it's uncomfortable. They weren't extraordinary people, they were just two people who committed to being kind, to being real, and to not giving up when things got complicated. In doing so, they created something rare, a relationship not built on fantasy, but on fierce, daily intention. And that, perhaps, is the real love story. Not the one that begins with magic, but the one that is sustained by choice. Years later, when asked how they made it work, they didn't speak of grand gestures or perfect harmony. Maya smiled and said, we showed up. Every day, even when it was hard. Daniel added, we listened, forgave, and kept choosing each other. Their love wasn't flawless, it was intentional. Built not in the rush of emotion, but in the quiet strength of commitment. And in that choice, repeated over time, they found something enduring, something real, home in each other.